Welcome to Champlain Presents. I'm Spencer Pearson.
I'm Dan O'Brien. Champlain Presents is a showcase of work from seniors in the broadcast media production program at Champlain College. These are documentaries reproduced in a course about creating longer form stories.
This is the fourth year the show has run on RETN, but this time we're going to mix things up. A bunch of us are going to be presenters for the show. So if you see some musical chairs going on, not to worry. We're going to take turns introducing the stories and basically talk to each other about what we all did.
But just to be clear, everything you're about to see was made entirely by us. Some of the student producers in the class worked by themselves, many of us worked in small groups. And we have some really interesting pieces to show you. Some are Vermont stories, others take us to different places.
Case in point, we'll head south to western Massachusetts and look at how a police corruption case involving a major theft from a children's toy fund had an impact on a community.
Back in Burlington, we meet members of the Tibetan Association of Vermont. These are people fighting for the rights of Tibetans overseas and preserving their culture here in the Green Mountain State.
The minor leagues. Two of our classmates traveled around the Northeast and did interviews with former professional baseball players. Their story looks at life in the minors.
Fake news. We're talking about false information that spreads like wildfire. Our colleagues speak to experts and demonstrate the dilemma by creating a fake news story with fake followers.
What does it mean to be a friend online? Is it possible? One of our seniors argues, yeah, it is. He meets his buddies regularly on Xbox.
Food and culture. Two of our classmates take us around the globe and back to Burlington with a look at the connection between what we eat and who we are.
And now, we begin with our first story, about people who have had laryngectomies. That's a procedure when the larynx is surgically removed, usually because of cancer.
The aftermath of surgery is patients have to speak with some kind of device. One of the producers of this project, Kaylee Mumford, is a Vermont native and daughter of a laryngectomy patient.
Kaylee and her partners made this because they felt people with laryngectomies are stereotyped, often depicted in anti-smoking campaigns as disabled and sounding odd.
But Kaylee's dad, Walter, is more than a survivor. He's living his life. This piece by Kaylee Mumford, Veronica Miner, and Caroline Knoll is called Still a Voice.
When I wake up in the morning, first thing I do is shave. And I have to be careful and keep it covered, like stomach covered, not to get any air down there and stuff. Then I spray it with a saline solution, and that loosens up the mucus. And I cough my brains out. And whatever's left, I have to pull it out and make sure everything is clean. Then I brush it, and then I usually cover it up with a filter. And then usually by 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I start coughing more. So I know it's building up with mucus, and I have to do the same thing again to keep it clean. Even though I have a laryngectomy, I can still talk, and I can yell, and I can whisper if I really want to. I don't know if that really comes off as a whisper, but there's nothing to be afraid of. And I still have a voice. The first time I remember smoking was fishing with my oldest brother. I was probably 10 or 12 years old. And I found out when I smoked or had something in my hands, it would calm me down. The day I was told that I had cancer, I was pretty well freaked out. I sort of knew in my mind that I did because I could feel something in my throat when I was swallowing, but I didn't want to admit it. And then I went for a biopsy, and they called me on the phone, and I was all by myself, and they told me I had cancer.
I don't think anyone ever thinks, even no matter what their lifestyle, that they're going to get cancer. We had 2 young girls at home, and we had a business to run, so it was quite crazy. But he pushed through cancer very well.
I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but my sister-in-law works for ENT and at UVM Medical Center, and so we immediately called her.
The plan was just to remove the tumor, and or even a partial laryngectomy, which he would still have his vocal cords and have use of his vocal cords then.
Yeah, I talked to my wife quite a bit, and she knew how afraid I was of the operation, and I think she knew that I thought I was going to die. That was my biggest fear.
It changed our lives. His life was totally changed, so that impacted me, being his wife, as well. He was, his personality changed a little, and, rightfully so. I mean, he got into a situation where, you know, he wasn't happy for a while, and then he came around and he bounced back. And his voice before surgery was probably a middle tone. He didn't have a deep voice or particularly high voice. It was somewhere in the middle. And I actually think I still hear that voice rather than his voice today.
Which is the rest of it? Which half is that? My rest of the half. The ones that didn't show up.
After I woke up from surgery the next morning, and I got to see what I looked like. So I was horrified. I was just sad and so depressed that this even happened. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And I blamed myself a lot. You know, because everybody told me, don't smoke, you get cancer.
Laryngectomy is an operation usually done for cancer to remove the voice box. And it essentially separates the lower airway, meaning the lungs and trachea, from the upper airway, meaning the nose and the back of the throat. A partial laryngectomy means that you leave some structure which leaves a communication between the lower and upper airway. Often with partial laryngectomies, you don't need to have any permanent opening in the neck, but it always impairs swallowing a little bit. Total laryngectomy is where you completely disconnect the lower airway from the upper airway.
At the time, they were hoping they would be able to get the spot without doing a total laryngectomy. And I didn't know that it was a total until I woke up after the operation.
They decided to go with the full laryngectomy because the tumor was so big on the vocal cords, they couldn't get the tumor without taking the vocal cords also. When Walter was in surgery, when he came out into recovery, they did not want us to tell him that he had had a full laryngectomy. They wanted the anesthesia to wear off and to be out of recovery and back in a room before he was told that he had a full laryngectomy.
And then when I woke up, I remember hearing a good friend's voice and my wife's voice saying, are we going to tell him or are we going to wait? And I really couldn't talk and I didn't know what was going on. So I already knew. Then I had a total.
I was working on the day of Walter's surgery. His surgery was scheduled for 1 o'clock. So I worked in the morning and then I walked up the hill and met Mary Jo here at the main campus in the waiting area.
My sister Karen was very helpful. She was a great moral support for me. She was with me during the surgery and beyond.
And after the procedure, we were waiting and Dr. Sofferman came to speak to Mary Jo and Andrew, and I was present. And Mary Jo was sitting there quietly, tears running down her face. But she was reassured because the surgery went well. It was just the aspect of him losing his ability to speak.
The hardest part was, going through this is getting used to my voice, and that, it's going to be different, for the way I talked, and the reaction of people looking at me when I first start talking.
There are different options for speech after laryngectomy, and different people choose to use different options. And they're always making minor improvements on those prostheses so that they have fewer complications.
He started using what they call a Servox. It's a device that's handheld and they put it up against their neck and the vibration is what makes the voice. He now speaks with what they call, he has a TEP put into his neck and he presses on it and that's how the voice comes out now.
It's 1959 technology. It's called the Champlain 9-volt. Not many people use it because of the technology now with implants and stuff like that, which I did have, but my body rejected it.
One of my customers, who used to be very, very quiet, heard me talking to somebody else about, that I had cancer of the larynx. And all of a sudden he started talking to me and told me that his father had the same thing. And he wanted to know if I wanted his father to come down to the store and talk to me. And I said, sure. And he did with another guy. And they talked to me for quite a bit. And I saw what their lives were like now. And they were pretty funny and jovial. And that calmed me down quite a bit. That's how I got involved with the patient, because the support group that I ended up joining was, these two guys were more or less running it, and there was a bunch of other people at the time. And I knew they were doing that. And I told them if they ever needed help to let me know. And unfortunately, that guy passed away, and I just kind of stepped in and took over. You're doing well, though. Did you go dancing last night? All right.
I met Walter in the hospital after my 3rd surgery. And when I saw him, I was quite relieved to know that, you know, there's life after this devastating surgery. That's next year, man, if you ask me.
He wasn't not a happy camper, or his wife, and he was really angry. And I remember being angry also that, you know, we let this happen to ourselves.
I think we were friends, me and Walter, right away. And of course it evolved over time. And now it's like, I don't see him too often, but a couple times a year usually try to gather together with all of us.
It's really amazing. It's really,
That's it,
just really thought the support group would be very helpful, just to be with people that have been through the same experience, have the same surgery, same cancer, you know, share ideas with each other.
We kept on going back as it was supportive. Everybody became my friend. You know, we all had, you know, same problem, everything in common. And it was like learning how to live all over again.
I think being involved with this group's helped me in quite a few different ways. Number one, I got to meet some pretty interesting characters, is what I gotta tell you, because most of us larynjectomies are pretty much characters. So, over the years, you know, we lost a lot of close friends, but we enjoyed the time that we had with them. So I think that was one of the best things that happened to me by joining the group.
You know, the basic laryngectomy hasn't changed a lot in the last 40 years, but that's one of my former mentors, who was actually Walter's surgeon, used to say that's because it really works well and patients do well, and that's why we continue to do it. So
I guess the hardest part is just watching someone that you love have to go through all this. You know, it's such a hard time.
Seeing Walter go through this process was much different than seeing a patient in the hallway that I did not know, even though I knew somewhat what they were going through. But to have a family member facing this, I really never thought I would have a family member going through something like this.
I was really happy with all the people that I had supporting me. You know, my family, the people in the store. And, you know, you can survive and you can live. And you can talk again.
Welcome back. I'm currently sitting with Caroline and Kaylee, two of the producers for Still a Voice. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. We're missing Veronica today, but she couldn't make it, so.
It's a shame. You guys had a really great documentary. I had a couple of questions. For a piece like this, what exactly were you trying to accomplish in telling the story? It's obviously a very personal story.
Yeah, definitely. So as someone who grew up with a father who was a laryngectomy, I always see the looks and stares people get when he starts talking. And I think that comes from them not understanding like why he's talking that way. And with this piece, we were kind of hoping to accomplish to help like people understand more about who he is and that he is a person and he's more than the voice he has now.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and you can definitely see that in the documentary. And just another question, what was the most rewarding part of producing this whole documentary?
Well, I'd say that the entire process was super rewarding because we got to talk with so many really incredible people who had been through this major surgery, and just being able to hear their story and to present like Walter's story in like a really authentic light that spoke to everything he'd been through. I think that was really inspiring and a really educational kind of thing. As someone who didn't grow up with that, I just think that, you know, it was rewarding, that aspect, just to learn and to hear his story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Vermont is loaded with small towns with small police departments, not dissimilar from the town of Lee in western Massachusetts. One of the two producers of this next piece, Dan O'Brien, is from Lee, so he was acutely aware of the police corruption case that rocked that community. This piece asks the bottom line question: what happens to a town when the police chief ends up going to jail? Dan and his partner Noah Kidney explore that in their story, United States versus Buffus.
Joe's Diner. Here, you can get a burger and fries for just $6.99 and unlimited coffee for just $1 more. For more than 60 years, this diner has thrived in the small town of Lee, nestled in the Berkshires of western Massachusetts. Lee was established in 1777 and eventually became a center for the paper industry in the late 19th century. Renowned artist Norman Rockwell lived in this region. One of his famous Saturday Evening Post covers depicted a wayward boy talking to a cop in a diner that some claim to be Joe's. It's ironic, then, that such a seemingly idyllic place would most recently get attention for scandal and corruption. In 2012, the town of Lee appointed Joseph Buffus to chief of police. At first, he was highly regarded.
He was a nice young man, and as an officer and then as chief, he seemed very fair. He seemed very straightforward. I never had any kind of complaint about him. And matter of fact, I don't know hardly anybody that ever had a complaint about him.
He just had this winning, outgoing way about him.
But things would soon take a turn.
The thing up at the lake, that's what started the whole mess.
State police, I believe, had gotten wind of some online advertisements that sounded like they were a front for a solicitation operation. That led to a very small scale sort of raid on the inn at Laurel Lake.
In other words, the inn was under investigation. According to court documents, the owners, Tara Viola and her husband, Thomas Fusco, were running a prostitution ring and had been hosting swingers parties. Viola offered to become an informant so that she and Fusco might avoid arrest.
The couple found their business on the ropes, so she had this idea, well, I'll start prostituting myself to make ends meet.
It was kept on a hush. I don't think people really knew much about it. I mean, maybe some people did. I never heard of it before it got brought out in the media.
And how it sort of spun out of control from that point was Mr. Buffus, while Tara was being interviewed by police, but announced to our paper that these two had been arrested, when that wasn't quite the case.
This is where a criminal investigation reportedly ended, with an arranged payoff. The inn owners wanted the charges dropped.
That's when he offered them the opportunity to provide a $4,000 donation, he called it, to this charity toy fund that he ran.
The charity, called the La Liberté Toy Fund, was managed by Buffus. The charges against the inn owners were dropped, but later, Massachusetts State Police discovered Buffus had transferred their $4,000 contribution to his own personal bank account and had spent all but $10. Consequently, in the case of United States of America versus Joseph Buffus, he was convicted on one count of extortion, sentenced to 27 months in a minimum security prison. When the story broke, Buffus said little, save for a few short remarks outside the courthouse.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon, and God bless America. Vote for Donald Trump.
But media coverage sent shockwaves through the town of Lee.
These two kind of colliding scandals with the corrupt police chief stealing from the poor children's Christmas charity, and this local couple who ran an inn that was a front essentially for a prostitution ring and a swinging mecca, I guess. To me, that was just a bomb. I mean, one of those things would have been a bomb in and of itself, but the two of them colliding, I thought just, it was like this nuclear thing in this pretty little small town.
When it came out about the toy fund and stuff like that, basically the whole town just kind of said, you know, anybody that would do that, we're done with.
it was a surprise to me as it was a surprise to anybody else, everything that came out. I mean, you're always taught to look up to those in uniform.
However, even after his conviction, some town residents aren't sure justice was truly served.
I think Joe got screwed. I really do. The selectmen, I think, had to cover their own tail feathers, and they did.
He's paying an astronomical punishment compared to these people. I don't even know if they went to jail, if they were fined anymore. And I don't think that that's necessarily fair. I think if that's really what they were doing and they were found guilty, which apparently they felt they were, if they gave $4,000 to someone, you know, as a fine, then I think they should have been held accountable.
No matter what anyone thinks about Joseph Buffus, one thing is undisputed. The La Liberté Toy Fund has been tainted as a charity.
It's been affected drastically since then. Christmas time, it used to get thousands and thousands of dollars, and now hundreds. It's so sad.
The scandal seems to have opened the eyes of many to the potential for corruption, even among those whose job it is to maintain order and justice.
I think a lot of people are a little skeptical a lot of times of things that go on, and I think there's a lot more questioning goes on now than it used to.
Still, there are others who disagree and believe the case has brought nothing but discord to the town and its people.
The only thing good that came out of that is when they had kind of like this tag sale to get rid of all their furnishings. I guess they were going bankrupt or they were selling or whatever. I got this lovely little settee. Of course, I had to clean because, you know. So now I get to kind of say that, you know, some of my furniture came from, excuse the language, the local whorehouse. So it's kind of quiche.
We're hardy New England folk. Bad things happen, we get our feathers ruffled a little bit, and then life goes on.
When something like this happens, you know, once everything gets finished and there's a process, this time there was a conclusion. So with that conclusion and him going to jail, I think there's a lot of closure for people.
I don't know. I feel like people aren't gonna forget it. People don't shake things off like that in this town. You steal from the town itself, you're stealing from all the people in the town. And I feel like that's the way that this community looks at it.
Joseph Buffus will soon know what reception he'll receive in Lee, as he's out of jail and serving the rest of his sentence under house arrest. I got in contact with him, but he declined an interview. In the end, the Buffus case left Lee divided. Divided about the lessons to be learned from what happened, and divided about the police chief himself.
They put this parade of character witnesses up on the stand, friends and townspeople, who said he's the type who will help old ladies across the street, he'll give people breaks, he's kind to people. I think that probably was true also. But I mean, most of us are not one thing. We're not evil swindlers, and we're not, you know, only people who will help old ladies across the street. I think he was both things.
We are joined here with the authors of our last piece, Daniel O'Brien and Noah Kidney. Hey guys.
Hey.
I just have a few questions to ask you. This one's for Dan. What kind of hurdles did you come across trying to get the info for this piece and the interviews you got?
The biggest one was simply finding people who want to discuss such a touchy topic in a town this small. And with the fact that most people in town either knew Buffus, grew up with Buffus, or had some interaction with him, the social pressure and social ramifications of possibly saying something negative about a townie could have created a lot of just social issues for people that would have spoken out. So it's difficult finding people who wanted to discuss it on film.
Yeah. Noah, coming from an outside perspective, what was this project like to work on?
Well, Dana's from Lee, and I've never been to Lee, so it was totally new experience. Had no idea what to expect coming into this town. Going into it, I thought, he would have a lot more detractors than we actually end up finding, considering the seriousness of the case. But it turned out that he actually had a lot of defenders, which was kind of interesting. So you never really know what to expect when you go into this.
Weird. Thank you guys for coming.
Vermont is sometimes described as one of the whitest states in the country, but at the same time, the Burlington area and Chittenden County have become increasingly diverse, largely due to refugee populations who have settled here.
One of those groups is the Tibetans. For nearly 60 years, Tibet has been under the thumb of China, struggling for independence. But as our classmate Jeff Lloyd learned, the challenges for Tibetans here are not only about their homeland, but also how to preserve their culture here in Vermont.
Jeff takes a look at the organization at the heart of this community in his story, The Voice of Tibet.
This group of dancers is moving in unison to the sound of traditional Tibetan melodies. In South Burlington, Vermont, at a church rented for the occasion, it's a New Year's celebration. Tibetans call it Losar.
Losar, which means New Year. Lo is year and Sar is new. So Losar is celebrated maybe like a 15 to 30 days period. Whereas in the United States, we try to celebrate it for about 3 days or so. It is one of the biggest holiday that we have.
More than 100 members of the local community come, many in traditional clothing, to celebrate the holiday. Events like this are always organized by the Tibetan Association of Vermont, or TAV. The TAV has been around for about 25 years, and its members face the challenge of preserving and promoting Tibetan culture in the Green Mountains of Vermont.
All the clothes that they might have, to show it on that day, it's a special day, so therefore you want to wear the best, and you want to eat the best and have a good time.
On this day, the mayor of Burlington is in attendance.
It is such an honor to be here with all of you this afternoon.
And so are representatives from the International Campaign for Tibet, all to honor one of its founding members.
This is a very special occasion for us.
But perhaps what's most striking to an outsider coming for the first time is the devotion to their spiritual leader and head of the Tibetan government in exile, the Dalai Lama. In this ceremony, everyone in the room offers a white scarf to honor and show appreciation for the Dalai Lama.
And His Holiness Dalai Lama, of course, he is our spiritual and temporal leader for Tibet. Right from the age of 16, he took the responsibility of taking care of the Tibetans, and we look to him as a source of our inspiration, and he is our hope, and he is an icon of peace for the world.
The Tibetan Association does many things like this to link people to their culture, but the story of Tibetans in Vermont began decades before the TAV was established. Now called the Tibet Autonomous Region, the former country of Tibet now makes up about a quarter of China's territory. Tibet was invaded by China in 1950, forcing the Tibetan government to sign the 17-point agreement, establishing it as part of China. They were invaded again in 1959 when the Dalai Lama fled to India and denounced the 17-point agreement. The Chinese Cultural Revolution in the 1960s was devastating for Tibet. In an attempt to perfect communism, the Chinese Communist Party declared that China must enter a new era. This meant abolishing all customs, thoughts, habits, and cultures perceived as a threat. Tibet's traditional way of life became a target.
It is a very a dying, I think, endangered culture, just because China took over Tibet, and it needs to be practiced, in Tibet, in China. China is not letting us practice our religion, our culture. They're suppressing it.
Outside the region, there's been a long ongoing campaign for Tibet's independence. The International Campaign for Tibet, the Free Tibet Movement, and TibetWatch.com are all international programs dedicated to breaking through the Chinese censorship barriers and reporting on the human rights violations in Tibet. Even though Vermont is thousands of miles away, the TAV has a responsibility to promote and support human rights and democratic freedoms in Tibet.
We stand here today in the same spirit to commemorate the 59th anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising Day, to remember and honor all the Tibetans who have sacrificed their lives for our nation's struggle for freedom.
Each year, the TAV hosts a Freedom Rally and March for Tibet. For this event, over 100 Tibetans and locals gathered on Church Street March 10th to remember the events of 1959. As they looped around downtown Burlington, their chants drew quite some attention.
To advocate or to educate people about this day and for the Tibet's cause, this is it is a platform where we can actually get to our neighboring, people.
There's a tremendous support from the people of Vermont towards the Tibetan issue, especially the mayors, not only Mayor Weinberger, but all the other preceding mayors also. They declared the 10th March as a Tibetan National Uprising Day and supported the Tibetan cause.
But calling for human rights and fighting for their culture is just one aspect of the TAV. Passing down that culture to the next generation is another. The Vermont Tibetan Community School in Burlington's Old North End meets every Sunday to teach children traditional speech and grammar. They begin with a prayer seeking refuge to Buddha and granting wisdom in their lessons.
I'm teaching them part of these prayers. It's a long life for the Dalai Lama. Now, prayer is more important than anything, We need to know our prayers. When we wake up early in the morning, we use the prayers. So that is a part of life.
It provides essential learning for young Tibetans to connect with their traditions and culture.
We like to learn about Tibetan stuff. And I like to learn ABC.
It's our duty to give it to the younger generation, but it all depends on the kids, how serious they take it. So in future, somebody will come up, there are too many kids growing up, so I don't know who's going to do best, but we never know.
We are Tibetans, so we have to, if it's not us that says, it's important, then no one is going to be taking care of it. So it is upon us outside of Tibetans living outside of Tibet to practice this culture and then to pass it on to our next generations. It's that much important.
We are really very fortunate that through His Holiness Dalai Lama and through that Buddhist culture and tradition, we are able to make a huge contribution to the world community. This is a very great contribution, and it is a world heritage we must preserve.
So we're back with Jeff after seeing his wonderful doc.
Thank
How
you.
you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well, thanks. So how did you get the idea for this documentary?
So during my time at college, I took a class on China and also a human rights class. And in both of those classes, I did research on Tibet and a lot of the issues with the Tibetan-China conflict.
And what was it like for you to work with the Tibetan population in Vermont?
Oh, they're insanely friendly. Every time I found myself thanking them, they would thank me back. And it just made me so much happier to do the doc for them and really pursue their cause.
Oh, that's so sweet. Well, thank you for being with us today.
Burlington is home to the Lake Monsters, its very own professional baseball team. One reason some people around here know a bit about the minor leagues.
But Jeremy Paiva and Maurice Providence wanted to know more. It turns out, the life for minor league players isn't glamorous, and often the pay isn't much. But that doesn't stop thousands of players from clamoring to get onto a professional roster.
Jeremy and Maurice spoke to 3 former players in this profile farm system in baseball. Their piece is called Minor League Memoirs.
For a young baseball player in love with the game, every swing of the bat, every ball in the glove, every run to first base represents another step in the dream of making it to the big stage, the major leagues. They have to prove they're the best to have the slightest chance of being drafted by a major league team. But being drafted isn't enough to secure a spot on the biggest stage of them all. It's not like basketball or football where young athletes go straight to the pros. In baseball, everyone works their way up through the minor league system. That system has 5 levels: the Rookie League, Short Season Single A, Double A, and finally Triple A. It's only when players reach Triple A do they get a shot at the majors. Few get this chance. Only about 10% make it to the big stage. These are the stories of 3 players who came close to the ultimate dream.
I am Marc-Antoine Berube, and I played for the Vermont Lake Monsters.
In 2015, Mark was drafted as a relief pitcher by the Oakland Athletics.
I always loved baseball, never thought I could do something with it.
My name is Jerry Rosenthal. I played in the early 60s. There was no draft when I was in those days.
Jerry signed a contract with the Milwaukee Braves and played 2 years with the organization, primarily as an infielder.
Tom Engel. I played in the New York Mets organization.
Tom was drafted in 1989 as a starting pitcher and reached AAA.
But once I got to camp with the Mets, then you realize, hey, this is going to be a little bit harder than maybe I thought it was, because every kid there is good.
These 3 players were on the field at different points in time. Mark was released in 2017, Tom in 1996, Jerry in 1962. For all of them, the minors ended up being a humbling and truly unforgettable experience.
It's just hard to put words for it. When I first walked into the locker room, it was in Arizona actually, the first time I met all the guys from my draft class. My first thought was probably like, everyone is going to be competing, everyone's going to hate each other. But let's say you had a bad outing, I mean, other pitchers would just go to you, hey, you're fine, bro, like, you get him next time. Let's say you had a good one, everyone was happy for you. I mean, maybe some people in the back of their mind were just, oh, I don't want him to do good. I don't know. What I learned was that you can't focus on that. You just can't focus on other guys. Focus on what you can do it as best you can, and whatever happens, happens. I guess I kind of knew that, I mean, minor league players are not making that much money, but I love baseball so much, and for me, it's just an experience that is worth a lot more than money.
In the 1960s, however, money wasn't the only thing players had to worry about.
You're just playing and trying to improve yourself, prepare yourself to the next level. You're not thinking about the system, but the system was pretty bad. It was segregated. In order to have integrated play or integrated living, you had to have a separate facility away from the white folks, so to speak. So it was integrated within the camp, and we lived in barracks, and we ate together. Beautiful fields, 6 beautiful fields, and that's where we trained. And any of the fellas that wanted to go into town, guys who had cars, they went in. A lot of the Afro-American players didn't go in for obvious reasons, so we had to do the shopping for them. We, as teammates, we supported each other, and you have to do that. And there were some guys that didn't, and they were sort of outliers. So my name is Rosenthal, obviously a Jewish-sounding name, and I had some incidents, you know, with a player on my team in Yakima, and he was what I would call pretty much a virulent anti-Semite. You just blocked that out and just played.
There were antagonists, but there were also role models. Jerry credits two in particular.
Jackie Robinson, he was the icon for me. I mean, he was just the greatest player. I mean, you know, Mays was the best player I've ever seen, but for me, Robinson was my favorite player. My favorite manager was a fellow by the name of Jim Fanning. He was sort of set apart because most of the managers in my day were tough guys, chewed tobacco, and they not much education, etc. And they've been in baseball all their lives, and they're sort of rigid in their approach. And Jim was different. He was sort of a player's manager.
The first stop that I made was in Kingsport, Tennessee. We actually played on a diamond, a high school diamond that was also their high school football field. So the bleachers ran the length of all the way down to third base, all the way into left field. That was the football bleachers. And you know, then it was fenced off, and we had dirt where part of the dirt was on the infield was on their field, and our locker room was their football locker room, which was not nice by any stretch. The shower probably had 6 heads in it, and there were 25 guys on the team, so conditions were not great, and they didn't improve much as I traveled throughout the Appalachian League. You know, you still have to go out there and perform no matter the conditions because everybody's playing on the same field, pitching off the same mound, hitting from the same batter's box. But what you do get to see in spring training is you get to see the big league complex and what those conditions are like. So that dream's always out there for the ideal field and the ideal conditions that you know. The further you progress in the minor leagues, they will get better.
I had a little mental breakdown. Like that's probably a reason why I got called down. I mean, mentally you're trying to do too much. You put pressure on yourself when there's really, I mean there is, but you don't have to put pressure on yourself. So I guess that was kind of hard. One huge lesson with baseball is really control what you can control, and I said like I could focus on a lot of negative stuff and fear a lot of stuff, but I just choose not to because I look at what I can control. And then so like let's say I look at my career, I'm like, did I really do whatever I could do? And then my answer is yes, so I'm fine with whatever, and then I have no regrets, and I can live with myself saying that. I mean, I'm ready for life just because, I mean, I am who I am because of baseball.
I was playing on the AA team in spring training, and they released me after that. It took a long time to not feel that feeling of alienation that this is something I lost in my life, you know. But when you get to your late 20s, you know it's over. I thoroughly enjoyed my time. It's something I treasure for all the years I've lived, and I always will. I was 21, 22 years old, and what's not to love? You're doing something that you love.
There comes a certain time in your career where you realize, you know what, the tools that I have aren't the tools that I need to get to the big leagues. And that realization's tough. It's tough to be the best for as long as you have been, and then ultimately you're no longer the best. So dealing with that was tough, but also, you know, it was a good point in my life to realize, you know what, this part of my life's behind me, but there's a whole lot more ahead of me. When I went back to college, I was in a broadcast journalism major, which ultimately led me to ESPN, which I've been there now for 17 years. I always said if I can't play sports, I want to work in sports. And the unique thing about playing professional baseball is you have people from not only all over the United States, but from all over the world. And to put all those people together and to learn a little bit of a foreign language, to get to work and play alongside kids and men from other countries, it's awesome. All those memories and the friendships, and it's all stuff that you'll keep with you for the rest of your life. If you have a dream, never look back and regret that you didn't give it everything you had to get there. Don't leave anything, on the table. Put it all out there, work your butt off. Study, work out, and don't have any regrets, because you don't want to look back when you're my age or anybody else's age and say, boy, I wish I would have done this, or why didn't I do that? Do it all. There's so many resources out there for kids now to look, to research, to educate themselves, that you need to put yourself out there and educate yourself and work hard and just have no regrets.
We're joined here by Jeremy and Maurice to talk about their piece. So, you guys, what made you choose this piece to do?
Well, originally we wanted to delve into this subject because we were really interested in how making it so close to the major leagues, the big stage, and then not actually progressing to the major leagues, what kind of effects that had on someone, what kind of effects that had on their future. And what we found along the way was that throughout the 3 interviews that we did, everyone had very different stories, but they all learned quite a lot from their experiences, and it was very rewarding, to be honest.
Now, it's obviously a pretty specific topic. Not everybody knows about the minor leagues, let alone that it's a thing. Did you guys know a lot about the minor leagues going into the project?
Well, Jeremy knew a lot about it more than I did, but it was really interesting to kind of see that process, because you kind of go in having this vision that once you're in the minor leagues, you just assume you're going to make it to the professional baseball league at some point. But no, learning or being in this documentary kind of just like showed that you don't. There's so many different experiences that you can go through.
Wow, yeah, that's very cool. Well done, guys.
Fake news. It's a term that gets used a lot these days, in part because President Trump makes reference to it a lot. But what does fake news mean, and why does it matter? Of course, the term fake news can refer to parody, like comedy shows, or even just accusations of false reporting. But in this story, 3 of our classmates took a closer look at news that's entirely made up. They learned how frighteningly simple it can be to create a fake story, and then convince some people it's true. The producers of this piece are Riley Price, Caleb Coffey, and Spencer Pearson. Their story is called False Factory.
This is a newspaper. You see them everywhere. You trust them. Why? It's kind of a blind trust, right? What makes you know that a paper, this paper, can be trusted?
You know, when you are looking at a print publication, you can immediately tell, because they have a masthead, they have a list of, who owns this publication? Where is it published? Who are the people writing the stories? Who are the people editing the stories? You know a lot about that publication just from their masthead.
But that's all visual. It's an aesthetic. So what does it mean in a world where anything can be created, recreated, and manipulated? The answer is nothing. It means nothing. And we've seen why.
Fake news meant exactly that. Deliberately false stories posing as news, especially in non-traditional news sources like digital media.
For For the longest time, we've seen fake news come and go. We've seen yellow journalism and tabloid infotainment.
You know, when you walk into a grocery store and you walk up to the checkout line, you see some publications probably next to you. You see the typography of their crazy headlines, the Brad does this, Angelina does that. You know instantly when you look at those publications that they're gossipy tabloid publications.
But it wasn't until recently that fake news became dangerous. And we're not talking about The Onion, Weird Al, or SNL.
Stefan.
We're talking about truly fake and damaging stories built around lies.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
It wasn't until 2016 that we saw just how dangerous fake news can be.
You are fake news. Sir.
Because for the first time, it was directed at us.
Fake news is a concern for the health of our democracy. And, you know, obviously what reporting is and what news is, you know, keeping people accountable, keeping the truth out there. And when words like that are thrown around, you know, people can be so easy to believe it, but you really just got to focus on, you know, the truth and finding what that is and keeping the facts straight.
So what tipped us off? What made fake news publicly dangerous? And how does it still exist if these questions have answers? We wanted to find out. But before we get too far, we should probably introduce ourselves. There's three of us, all interested and scared by the recent developments in the world of fake news. There's Caleb, there's Spencer, and then there's me, Riley. We were interested in fake news, more importantly, how easy it seemed to become a part of it. Is it possible that it's that easy to create an online fake news network? It was easy, really easy. There are operations across the globe, effectively changing the tide in public elections or altering the social lives of users on an incomprehensible scale. And we were doing it from a small production stage in Vermont.
So should I get my notebook?
All we needed to start was a laptop and a well-designed Twitter account. We called ourselves the Daily Atlantic Herald.
We have a follower?
Yeah.
Who? I don't know, it's not loading.
There were some obvious barriers to entry. For us, it was mainly money.
Oh god. Wow. Whoa. So these could be pretty expensive, so we'll try someone else.
We didn't have much, but with enough money, there would have been very little separating our numbers from that of CNN or Fox News. At the first search, we found a number of possible options, all accessed with the search term Twitter followers by.
Social envy, Twitter on fire.
Eventually, for $35, we were promised 5,000 active followers, with the specification that they were active users, not bots. Initially, our follower count stayed the same, with only 2 accounts choosing to follow our news source, one of which claimed to help its followers become policemen, offering tweets such as, "Your mind is your greatest weapon. Your body is just the holster you carry it in." Things seemed a bit off.
What does that even mean?
It wasn't until later that day that our account started to grow. Then things got weird. A majority of our followers were Russian. Our follower count fluctuated drastically from 2,300 to 800, and none of our followers would actually tweet. If they did, it was just in Russian. But we had the numbers. We had the credibility of an online news source, and all it took was one day and $35. We hadn't even sent a single tweet yet, but we had the platform to do so. Why was this so easy? Why is this so accessible? Much like many of life's greatest mysteries, the answer can be found in Macedonia.
According to Hillary Clinton, this tiny nation has destroyed America's democratic tradition.
Though not exclusive to the country, Macedonia has become a focus point in the exploration of fake news.
There's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
It comes largely from poor economic structure, making the production of fake news very profitable, each click translating to about $1 American. At the same time the internet has been churning out false facts, it's also been turning the business of news companies upside down.
The way that the newspapers and other media organizations, the way that their businesses have been disrupted, it means that they've laid off journalists and not just reporters, but editors and copy editors and fact checkers. So there are fewer people doing this work, which is part of the problem.
It suddenly became a lot harder to detect fact from fiction. And that's crazy, right? We thought so. But despite it all, it still seemed too easy. The question remained, why?
13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies accused of a massive effort to meddle in the election, and not just from afar, but they say the Russians were right here in the U.S. too.
Coming from the expansive investigation into potential election involvement, were headlines left and right about Russian troll factories, as they were called.
The defendants allegedly conducted what they called information warfare against the United States, with the stated goal of spreading distrust towards the candidates and the political system in general.
But just like everyone else, a lot of the information went right over our heads.
Did you get any of that?
Think of it this way. Fake news is written and propagated across the globe in developing countries like Macedonia, supported by the bots purchased and directed by Russian nationals. So, we'll ask again. Why is this so easy? It's simple. It's not illegal.
There's no law that prevents you from creating a Twitter account, because then we're getting into amendment rights, right? And freedom of speech.
What does that mean for all of us? Fake articles and posts appear on timelines, seemingly real, next to other posts that are, in fact, legitimate.
We tend to believe the people we are connected with. Social media is designed, these platforms are designed specifically to build trust and take a trusted person and extend their network.
So, as long as this remained miraculously legal, it seemed only reasonable that we could take our already popular news network and start populating it with our own dramatic headlines. It proved to be a lot harder than it seemed.
Spaghetti sandwich.
That's your first story idea?
Yeah. Like a meatball sub, but with noodles.
Car crash mid-air. A car crash in the sky?
Yeah.
Who's in the car crash?
Coney. 7:29, 7:30.
Someone come up with a fake disease name. Just syllables.
Tripantsless omyactus.
Say that one more time.
Tripantsless omyactus.
Tripantless.
What about trypintomyactus?
Our story, that the consumption of tuna brought on the spread of a disease called trypintomyactus, was easy. The hard part, now, was to get people to believe the story. And at first, it was slow. But then our tweets got noticed. We saw our numbers climb in the tens of thousands, and an increase in follower count beyond the amount we ordered. Our story had been sent to over 16,000 Twitter timelines.
I mean, I think it's a journalist's responsibility in there every single day to, obviously get the facts right, tell the truth, get the story. But for a reader, if you're on a website and there's 15 different articles, what is the right article? If you're reading an article on The Onion and you come back and tell me, well, I read this, we know that's obviously satirical and we know that's not right. It's the reader's responsibility to understand that and read that.
It was surprising, exciting, and scary. We were effectively joining the very system that has been attacking the truth. It was easy, and that was the worst part. We had to destroy it.
It occurred to me I have no idea how to delete a Twitter. I don't know how to do that.
If everything was just as fragile as we had come to find, what good are we doing by exploiting it?
We've been talking about false news, that reports that you see that are not true. The fact that these are out there and proliferating is not just a bad thing for all of us in journalism. It's also an opportunity, because what's happening right now is that engaged and smart media consumers, people who love journalism, people who read and subscribe to newspapers and podcasts and give money to public radio, all of those people are becoming more and more aware of how fragile this ecosystem is and how fragile journalism is and how they need to support it.
After all, what good is the news? What good is journalism if we can't trust it?
We're back
back with Riley, Caleb, and Spencer. Hi.
Hi. Why did I wave? You're right here. Okay.
It's okay. So I have a few questions in regards to your doc. And the first one is, did making this doc really change your perception at all in regards to fake news?
Yeah, I think it opened our eyes a little bit more. I know me mostly, I can say, didn't look at news sources. You would just see a story on Facebook or Twitter or something, and it's kind of like easy to just believe it. I'm guilty of that, I'm sure, and I think doing this project made me more aware of it, and I know what to look for now, and it's like kind of scary how close to like real news it seems with some of these fake sites and fake articles that you can find.
Oh, absolutely.
It's also just a really big topic, something I didn't really understand before I we started, I should say, working on the project. And it's just, in the 10 minutes we had, there's still so much we haven't even brought up or didn't get a chance to talk about. And I think that's kind of another scary element of it, which is that it can take so many different shapes. So it was definitely enlightening.
All right, and what is it like to get fake followers?
For one, surprisingly expensive. It's not cheap.
Waste of money.
Yeah, they do it in increments, so it's, you can get, we spent $35 to get 5,000 followers, and it kind of goes up from there, so you can, buy upwards of 100,000 to, 500,000 followers, and the price goes up with it, which is curious, but yeah, we were saying earlier, it's not as validating as you might think. It's not as fun. You kind of think, oh, I want my account to have 10,000 followers, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't really know any of them.
Not very fulfilling.
Yeah, that was my impression at least.
You can't get verified from it either, so.
No, so what's the point?
Yeah, everyone wants the blue check. Like, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, thank you so much, and good job on your doc.
Thank you.
A lot is said these days about how mobile technology and social media are making our generation antisocial. But one of our classmates wanted to tell a story that's just pretty much the opposite of that.
Sam Robinson has been playing video games with his hometown friends for a long time. It turns out he has an exceptionally devoted group of buddies who interact with one another just about every day, sometimes for hours.
But it's not face-to-face. It's all done through games on Xbox. Here's Sam's story called Real Friends Online.
The internet. A lot of people are on it. Like, a lot of people. Social media is a very big part of that. People are talking to one another through Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat. And if you're like me, you play video games on it. And it isn't that hard to find disdain for that, especially coming from older generations. Kids are always looking down at their phones, millennials are addicted to technology. How about you go hang out with your real friends instead of these people online? But I say, why can't somebody online be a real friend? Why does using an online space to interact delegitimize a friendship? That doesn't make sense to me. I can personally think of a group of people online who are good friends, best friends. And I think they'll make a good case that there are real friends online.
I'm Drew. I'm the Blue Icy on Xbox, and about myself, I am a psychology major at Rhode Island College, and I work at a concession stand in a movie theater nearby.
I'm Steven Gravelin. My gamer tag's The Green Icy. I used to be doing engineering, now I'm doing political science, play a lot of Fortnite, 43 wins. But yeah, I've been playing Xbox for, geez, upwards of 7 years now, probably. We've all been playing together for a long time, so.
My name is Josh Fayola. I'm from Warwick, gamertag Toxic Josh. And ironically enough, I'm actually also an ordained minister.
A number of us have been going to school together for years. Me and Nick, or also known as the Red Icy, have been going to school together since like kindergarten. Gave me an opportunity to even though I couldn't meet up in person a lot of times out of school, it gave me an opportunity to know them more and spend time with them more. outside of school.
Yeah, but I can't do this, guys.
I chose the blue icy as a gamer tag because there was like a period of time over like the summer of like 2016 that I was like notorious among like the other staff in the concession stand for having just like a crippling addiction to the blue icy, which is a frozen beverage that we sell on the concession stand. I had a crippling addiction, and as a joke, as a meme, I changed my name on Xbox to the blue icy.
As you probably noticed, there's a theme in regard to usernames. Drew as the blue icy and Steve as the green icy, but over 1,000 miles away from everyone else is another icy, Nick, the red icy.
My name is Nick. My in-game name is the Red Icy. I am currently a third-year engineering student at Georgia Tech, but originally I lived in Rhode Island until 2015.
I go on Xbox at whatever ungodly hour of the night after I get home from work, or if I'm supposed to be doing schoolwork, and typically they're on also, and typically the first person on starts a party.
A party is a private voice chat room through Xbox that one can drop in and out of. People can be playing completely different games while still being able to talk to one another through this party system.
Invites the second person, and then after then, other people will log on and see that these people are on, and they'll just kind of fall into the party.
There's more to the group than just the games we play. The Xbox parties are for the most part a social space, and out-of-game conversations make up a bulk of the airspace.
Alright, you know what's better than cake?
Cake?
A cup of rice.
No. No, I disagree strongly, actually.
To like, Drew misspells the word miss, and we don't let him live it down for like 3 hours.
I was saying, I meant to say, oh, I miss the game Super Amazing Wagon Adventure. I said I mass the game Super Amazing Wagon Adventure, and this was a discussion, this was a topic of conversation for about 30 minutes after that.
At this point, one question at the heart of it all is still up in the air. Why, aside from pure coincidence, is Xbox the go-to for our social interaction on a day-to-day basis?
It's definitely a time thing. I don't really get to see many people in general, like outside of like my schedule of going to school, then work, then home, and sleeping, and wake and repeat every day of the week.
There's just a lot that goes into planning actual physical interaction. So
especially around this age.
Yeah, Xbox, you get on, you play whatever game you want to play. People join you, they join you. If they don't, they don't. So, but you're still talking to them no matter what.
Think of it this way. Our group often interacts online at least 3 to 4 hours throughout the day. Probably about 20 to 30 hours in a week. Over the course of a year, that adds up to around 2 total months. Maybe that sounds weird, but according to a report from the Pew Research Center, 57% of male teens have made a new friend online, with 29% making over 5 friends online. And of male teens 13 to 17 years of age, 52% of them spend time with their friends playing video games. 13% doing this on a daily basis.
Playing Xbox as opposed to like meeting in person is just like, we didn't go out to get a bite to eat and like hang out. We slayed a monster. We killed a big thing today.
It's almost like we live with each other, but we don't.
Yeah.
Thank God we don't. In terms of social interaction, it's by far the best.
It's like a way to talk to people who like are pretty much always there, that I can like depend on, who I don't believe are lacking in moral fiber whatsoever.
At the end of the day, we're all there for each other.
We talk while we play. A lot. Our conversations can end up getting to pretty personal stuff. Probably more so than we get pretty much anywhere else outside the group. To us, there's a deep and personal connection that is plain to see for us.
Like something really harsh, and it just like
usual
12-year-old like didn't have any sort of confidence about myself, and especially my voice. And
like, well, that's the last thing I do ever.
But to those on the outside, the perception of the group can vary drastically.
It's funny because my dad, he's like, man, I wish I had what you guys had, have, because he's like, you know, you had to go physically places to see people. He's like, it would have been so much easier just to turn on the Xbox and talk to people. I totally get where you guys are at. He's like, that your generation is going to be so much more like interconnected because of online interaction.
My family is less understanding
Yeah.
story. Like my dad has stopped trying to understand it. My stepmother is just like, I really wish one day that you'd grow up and get rid of those video games. And I'm just like, you don't understand. Like
It's not just about the games.
One, this is like a just as, if not more, fulfilling medium of entertainment than like movies and like shows, because like you have direct interaction with them.
It's not even just like about like friendships and like classmates that you interact with, because like, for example, my older brother, he is in Japan now. He's working as like a substitute like English language teacher in Japan, and obviously that's a much greater distance. It's a bit harder to stay in contact, different time zones, whatever have you. He had some free time. It was Saturday night for him, Saturday morning for me, and I said, all right, how about I try to stream a game on Xbox here, and you'd be able to watch it, and then we could keep a video call going, and we could just play through it together, because it's kind of been a tradition of ours, taking these narrative, very like single player focused games and just like playing them together and just like enjoying that time together.
Well, it's what you make of it, because you can choose to seclude yourself and talk in game chat only and just be a jerk and talk to strangers, or you can choose to like reach out and sort of connect with these people who have similar interests in similar games. So you always have sort of like a group to hang with, so you're not always by yourself. Just because it's not in person doesn't mean you're not interacting.
Most of it is just, they've really bolstered the social interaction part.
Yeah.
Like online gaming changed a lot, and it revolutionized the way we see interaction. But like, because these people grew up not seeing that, they don't understand it. So I feel like it's a very misunderstood medium of entertainment, of interaction, of communication. And at the end of the day, we just really wish people would see it that way, but they don't, and they probably never will.
Maybe. To some, our group might seem like a strange bunch. Our friendship might be a bit hard to understand. But I know we're not alone. That for some people out there, playing games while talking as a group is a way to connect, no matter where you are. And so far, nothing has stopped us from going forward and being real friends, online.
We're now joined by Sam to talk about his piece. So Sam, I'm wondering, what inspired you to create this documentary?
Well, the thing that really inspired me is just the fact that like these people, my friends, are really important to me, and the way we kind of interact is something most people really don't think of unless they're kind of the same kind of people. So really that's just something I feel like needed to be said.
And what were some of the hurdles you faced creating this piece?
One was a technical one was more of a personal one. Technical one was just, I did not expect how incompatible the methods I used to gather gameplay footage and all that was going to go in the whole kind of production process. That caused a lot of issues in the whole process. And then on a more personal aspect, it's just having to deal with, you have these funny things your friends say and they're funny to you, but they don't really work for a professional piece, and you just got to cut them. So, yeah.
All right, that was some good work, and thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As the saying goes, you are what you eat. But our next piece takes that notion to a deeper level, to the idea that food is not just fundamental to survival, but also a profound aspect of culture, identity, and family.
Mackenzie Cordell and Dominique Cornacchia were roommates on a study abroad trip to Dublin. Dominique traveled even more to Argentina and China. From all those travels, the producers created a story about food and people, and also about Dominique's own family.
Their story on the connection between food and identity is aptly called ingredients.
My name is Dominique, and in the past few years, I've lived on 4 continents, learning everything I could about history, language, and culture. I traveled to understand how people on opposite ends of the earth could have unique national identities, yet in some ways, still be so similar. Somewhere along the way, I realized the one thing we all had in common: food. Something that always brings us together, a common denominator of the human race. I traveled the world to discover food as an expression of our identities, to discover who we are because of food and its ingredients. The first stop along my travels is New York, home of the Rios family, my family, and the place we meet my aunt, Elaine Mirando. Every year around the holidays, my family gets together to make pastelas, an ethnic dish from Puerto Rico, similar to tamales, but prepared uniquely with Puerto Rican ingredients. In total, the pastela making process took us over 10 hours.
The process is, oh my goodness, do I really want to do this again? It's a lot of work.
I call it Christine servings.
I would say the hardest part is we're using bananas, green bananas, and they're cooking bananas as opposed to your yellow bananas that you eat. Plantains, which is plátanos that we use. There's another vegetable kind of on the potato side. It's called yautía that we use. And all of that is either peeled or the leaf broken down, which is a lot of it. Sometimes it's really hard to do that. So you're doing each plátano and each green banana, everything one at a time, and that's why it becomes a family thing, because you really need a lot of help.
Are we getting this 2 at a time? 2 at a time.
After you're grating everything all together, all the bananas and the plátanos and the yautía, that becomes like a batter that we call masa. Then we put some achote, which gives it color and a little bit of taste. So we put down the cabbage, then you put the masa, and we do a whole pot of pork that we cut into pieces, and we cook that with a spice called recaito. It gives flavor to the meat.
Make it a little tiny.
Hey!
Oh yeah.
One more time in your fight.
Yeah.
Eating the product.
And that goes on top of the masa. We also add olives in there. We add chickpeas in there. We add roasted peppers in there. Then you're covering it all up with the masa. Then you take the paper, fold the sides and everything, and then you have to put string on it, because when you boil it, you don't want it to come apart. So you tie it with string. And then final product, you boil it in water for about an hour. And then, hey, it's time to eat now.
In the fall of 2016, I moved to Argentina to study Spanish for 4 months. That's where I met Lisa Ubalecker Andrade, a professor of history at the University of San Andres. Originally from Virginia, Lisa has been living in Buenos Aires for nearly 10 years.
I teach a class that is called The Culture of Food and Wine in Argentina, but I kind of think about it as the history and reality of Argentina through food. Argentina's culture, its idea of a nation, so much revolved around this production of meat. And the idea that the rest of the world eating beef is a luxury, but here was a source of pride for people.
As part of Lisa's class, we visited a well-known butcher shop in Buenos Aires. There, we met Arnan, a butcher who demonstrated his skills with a carving knife and explained the significance of Argentine beef.
So if the cow lived with a lot of stress in its life, you can see it in the meat.
The asado is an event. It's a very masculine event in which the asador, the man who runs the asado, generally puts on like a food performance for his friends and for his family or whoever he's cooking for. There's this great saying in Argentina that an asador is born, not made, with the idea that you can learn to cook, but to be a great asador, it comes from something else within you.
Ahora, si ese asador te cuenta un cuento, te cuenta una anécdota, es una persona cariñosa, y esa carne va a salir rica.
The actual event, you know, is often compared to a barbecue, but the difference is that it's also kind of like a love song to your friends, but through meat. The idea is to have asado with coming together of people who don't live in your house and share a moment together. I think that's probably the biggest, most important like cultural thing that it signals. And just the importance of meat. It's not just something that you eat, that there's a performance aspect to really putting, sort of valuing each cut of meat as a different individual subject, right? There's an amount of passion that each one should taste, each piece should taste differently. It has its unique way of being cooked.
¿Por qué pensás que el asado es muy importante para la gente acá?
Porque creo que está dentro del tejido emocional, digamos, el asado, el comer la carne con hueso. De hecho, se come con las manos, o sea, se agarra un pedazo de pan, un cuchillo.
A ver,
¿Rica? El asado es el asado, pero el asado también tiene un aroma. Y ese aroma está en los patios, en los pasillos, en las calles, en las obras, ¿no? Ese relato, ese aroma, nosotros lo tenemos metido, ¿entendés? O sea, adentro es como si fuera el sonido de la voz de tu madre o eso, ¿entendés? Eso es, ahí está.
It's about what that artist can bring to that specific recipe as opposed to modifying the food in some way, right? It's not about like suddenly putting hot sauce on your meat. It's about his exact timing or what kind of wood he used to create that asado. Do they always stay the same? Absolutely not. But are they sort of defensively guarded from the kind of new trending things or the ideas of globalization? Absolutely. There's an idea of trying to maintain some kind of classic because that's what people want.
I left Argentina in December, returning home in time for our annual Christmas tradition. My grandmother, Guadalupe Rios, is the matriarch of the family and the first Rios to learn how to make pasteles.
I was born in 1932, almost 86 years ago. I started making them when I was about 25, 26. I learned from my mother-in-law. I used to make them all the time with her. I never changed the recipe, and I always made them the same way my mother-in-law did. And there's no other way. Well, now that you can use a blender, yes, but I still like doing it the other way. It's just, that's the way I am.
That we should be using the blender and not the grater or whatever. They're like, why? You're still doing it that way?
You're taking out the main part is doing that. Those are my in-laws. That's Dana. That's the family. Dominique and Callie. That's Ariana. That's my husband and I. This is all me with all when the kids were young.
I do remember my mother making them all by herself. Everything from scratch to finish. And then when we moved from Manhattan into the Bronx, then we started again a lot more involved in helping her do it.
Did you do it all in one day?
Yeah. That's why I used to go to sleep about 7 in the morning to get up again.
Yeah.
Like, how did I do this? I like them to watch me if they want to learn, and that's what my kids did.
Okay.
There you go. It's a kind of a holiday when we really talk to one another and get together, and that was more or less why we did it, and I continue it. And hoping my kids will continue it too.
Hey, Britt.
Take the meat without.
In like 40 years, are we going to make these?
Yes. That's me. 40 years? I don't know what I'm going to do in 40 years.
It was just kind of important for me to learn how to do it and to really listen to them when they were talking, and so that I could really understand their language. I shouldn't say their language. It should be mine too. But unfortunately, we're not all fluent in Spanish.
My mother didn't know English, neither did my father. But my mother learned, and so did my father, they learned English from us. And then the pimientos, always speaking English with my husband, that we really didn't talk Spanish in the house.
Being that we're just not as, I don't know how to say this any better, not as Puerto Rican as we should be, I think that it's good for us to know that at least we could get our culture through food. If we're not doing it through language, we could at least get it through food and learn some of the language through the food.
After spending a few weeks at home, I left for Dublin, Ireland. That's where I met Pádraig O'Gallagher, owner and executive chef of Gallagher's Boxty House at the center of Temple Bar.
I had this idea I dreamt up in Venezuela when I was working for these Syrians. They used to make their pita breads, their flatbreads, and fill the center with koftas and different fillings and roll it. I was brought up on boxty, which is potato bread from the northwest of Ireland, from where I'm from, County Leitrim. And our pancake was a little bit similar, so I said, wouldn't it be great someday to come home and open an Irish restaurant? And my dad was a veterinary surgeon, we had a farm, we had a pub, we were well off, but you daren't leave anything on the plate when you were eating. And like our bon appetit was get it into you. And it was a family of 9 of us as well, so it was SOS, it was stretch or starve. Food is becoming more central towards our way of thinking. I think, again, going back 28 years and go back further, go back 170 years to An Gorta Mór, the big hunger, or the great hunger, which was the potato blight and the devastation of the potato crop. The population fell from 8.5 million to a little over 3 million. And I don't think we've ever actually properly addressed it. We kind of brushed it under the carpet. So our relationship with food never really developed, even though we had fantastic food. When I opened up here in '89, there was only 8 restaurants in the area. There's 83 or 85 today in this little Temple Bar area. And there was no Irish food. There was nothing celebrating Irish food. So with the boxty, I try to give it a label as, you know, okay, I can base everything around the boxty and add things onto it, but the foundation would be the boxty. There are 3 types of boxty: boiled, baked and pan boxty. The base ingredient for all of them are potatoes and flour. For the boxty pancake, you make a batter by adding milk and water. For the dumplings, you actually just knead it together and roll it out. And then the boxty loaf, again, you knead the dough, you add some butter to that, and then we have another product which are boxty fries. And they're boxty pancakes sliced very thinly and deep fat fried. And they're absolutely delicious, lovely. You have to get you some now. And these guys are just Moorish.
Oh, that's so good.
Very good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hospitality is in our nature. It's in our DNA. It's actually, hospitality was written into our old Brehon laws. If somebody came to your door, you were obliged to feed them. And that's actually laws going back 800-900 years. I like to think that we're friendly, open people. We'll talk to anybody. We'll have, as we call it, a bit of crack, a few drinks, laugh.
Before heading home, there was one last stop on my journey. For 10 weeks, in the summer of 2017, I moved to Shanghai, China. Every morning I woke up to cars and mopeds driving down busy streets. But before heading to class, I always made time to stop at one of the street vendors to grab a quick breakfast. Every day they served fresh scallion pancakes with eggs and pork made right in front of you. I also learned that even in the sweltering heat, it's always good to indulge in a Chinese tradition called hot pot. A meal in which a group of people gather around a boiling pot of water, adding raw meat and vegetables to create a simmering broth. At Din Tai Fung, an incredible restaurant with locations all over the world, I watched master chefs perfect the art of making steamed soup dumplings, each sculpted and weighed by hand with great precision. You could also say I almost perfected the art of eating them. Every country I lived in had their own food landscape. Although the food itself was vastly different, people everywhere treated food the same way. Food was a way to interact and participate in something integral to identity and culture. When I returned home, I realized these moments with my family in the kitchen were about much more than cooking.
This is Grandma's signature food, but I don't know, it's kind of in competition with this one. Oh, that's a good one too.
No, I forgot
Let's see, Grandma, let's see.
Hotel in Mexico, Stage, in Manhattan Center.
If it was just about pastelas, I mean, you can go out and just buy pastelas if you want to, but the thing about everybody coming together and just spending that quality time together and making them is what makes making pastelas so much fun.
Don't edit that out.
Class it up a little, all right?
As much as it could get like crazy and loud, I think that's the best part. Just everyone coming together to do it and the tradition that's behind it.
I think you did pretty well. You definitely had some hiccups with remembering, but you definitely got those olives in there.
Also Ollie, and then there's Ollie Jr., and then there's Ollie Jr., the second. And
She doesn't know how much base to put on for it. For the cabbage, like
puts like a little bit.
You're doing okay. Did you put the cabbage in there?
Yeah. She just makes them very fat and chubby.
That's how people like them.
Uncle George. Did Kathy, Mom, get over here real quick?
It's only once every year or every couple years, and like I said, just the tradition of it, I think, is just makes it worth it. Just the memories and like that our family's passing it on from generation to generation.
As we grated plátanos and yautía, adding each individual ingredient, spending hours in the kitchen together, we created more than just food. We created memories and reflections of our heritage. During my travels in Argentina, Ireland, and China, simply by eating food, I had learned about the history, social trends, people, and their national identities. And I came to realize I was participating in something bigger than myself. Every day, I was taking part in my own culture, just by choosing particular ingredients, preparing certain dishes, cooking with my friends, and sharing meals together.
And the whole idea is that our culture also revolves around food. You know, it's how we bring people together, it's how we communicate love, it's how we express ourselves. No food is from anywhere, really. All food is of the world. It's just kind of what people did with it that shaped what it actually means.
Hi, we're joined here with Mackenzie Cordell and Dominique Cornacchia talking about their doc that we just saw called Ingredients. So what inspired you guys to make this doc?
Well, when I was in Argentina, I actually took a class called the Food and Culture of Argentina, which was a really interesting insight into how food really does mean more than just, you know, survival and just eating. So for me, that was definitely something that connected all the dots, and having the opportunity to study abroad, it was a really incredible way to kind of open this documentary up to the world.
And you two worked together in Ireland. What was that like?
That was a really fun experience. I think we've been working with video and broadcasts through in Vermont this whole time, so it was really cool to kind of take that experience into a different place with people that we have never met before. So that was fun, learning about other people's thoughts on what food and culture.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. And that's our program. Thank you so much for watching Champlain Presents.
And special thanks to Jess Wilson, Executive Director, RETN, and all the RETN staff that helped put on this show. We really couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah.
And that's our show. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. See ya.